The title of the paper is A Comparative Study of Divine Names Across African Languages and Cultures. And if the two or three of you would like to introduce yourselves and your presentation, please.
So I am Michel Nguessan. I am at Governor State University in Chicago. So my co-presenters are Michael Akinpelu at the University of Regina in Saskatchewan, Canada. And then the third presenter is Hasiyatu Abubakari from the Institute of African Studies at the University of Accra. I will present on behalf of the group. So our presentation is a comparative study of divine names across languages, African languages and cultures. We are talking about the name that are used to refer to God and the names that are used to refer to other divinities in African cultures. So the purpose of the study is to examine these names across various languages and cultures, and to analyze linguistics, cultural, and religious aspects of these names. The key question is, how do different African societies name and describe deities? And what similarities and differences exist among these different names? So to do this is a comparative linguistics and cultural analysis. It's an examination of religious texts, oral tradition, and historical record. We considered different language groups. We considered the Ashanti of Ghana, the Yoruba of Nigeria, and also in Benin, the Kikuyu of Kenya, the Bakongo in Angola. I think some of them are in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. You have the Shona of Zimbabwe, the Zulu in South Africa, and the Dinka in South Sudan. In addition to that, we also consider our own language and cultural backgrounds for additional element of analysis. So it's a review of literature sources from religious studies, anthropologists, and different linguistics writings, and interviews with some cultural practitioners help us confirm some of the information that we could collect on our own. So, meaning of divine names. Usually the names refer to attributes of the creator, like word like almighty creators, and the names can relate to natural element. Typically, the name of God above and then the name of the different divinities refer to natural elements that are considered as intermediaries between God and human beings. Then the role of divine names, the names are used in prayers, rituals, religious ceremonies, and they define the relationship between humans and the divine. So common themes among those different cultures, there's always a supreme beings in all of these traditions. That's one of the common things. And the supreme being in most cultures is identified as something that is in a very high position. In some of the languages, the name coincides with the name of the sky. And the characteristics of that supreme being is that he's very far away from here, but he has control over everything that's going on. And there is always a need for some kind of intermediaries between that God and human beings. So you have God above, you have the different deities in the middle, and then you have human being on earth here, down here. So that is Nyame in the Ashanti language of Ghana, and it is Olodumare in the Yoruba language of Nigeria. It's Nge in the Kikuyu language. It's a Vijay in the Baluba language of the Congo. Nzambi in Bakongo of the Congo and Angola. Is Mwari in Shona in Zimbabwe. Is Nkulunkulu in the Zulu language, and is Nyalik in the Dinka of South Sudan. So many African spiritual systems recognize below God lesser divinities, ancestral spirits, and different spirits in nature. Typically, the fundamental element on earth will have some kind of spiritual essence that emanate from God the Creator. As such, in most of the cultures, earth and different major element on earth, like mountains, represent divinities. Water is a major divinity in all of these cultures. Fire is also a divinity. The wind, mountains, forests. So typically the major elements in nature represent divinities. In the Yoruba language, Ogun is the divinity of iron and war. Oshun is the goddess of love and rivers. Mbaba Mwana Waresa in the Zulu language, the goddess of rainbows and fertility. And Zivanguru in Shona is the spirit of rain and water. And when we say water in each culture, whatever is the source of water is around, is that symbol. I'm from Bauli land in the Ivory Coast. The major water that we have here is a river, a small river called the Bandama River. So we find that divinity in that river. Somebody who lives on the coast of on the shores of the Nile River will find that divinity of water in that river. And wherever there's no river, there's any source of water, they find it in whatever is local. And in the Dinka group, Abuk is the goddess of women and gardens. Okay, linguistics and cultural patterns. So the name conventions, the names are descriptive. Okay, is possessor of brightness, of light. And there is emphasis on power and omnipotence. Like in Oludumare, is the Almighty. Linking, it's also linked between, there's a linking between divinities to natural element, as I explained. The major elements of nature are divinities, mountains, forests, rivers, and whatever that element is in a specific geographic location, that's where they find it. Like if the Baule people move from Central Ivory Coast and they go and live in, let's say in the Congo, whatever source of water is that is around will be that divinity. So there's also the influence of language and dialects on that. As I said, in Ashanti, God is Yami, but there are several account-related dialects to the Ashanti, and those different dialects, the same name is maintained, but with different dialectal pronunciation. So it's Nyami in Ashanti land, it's Nyamie among the Baule, it's Nyamia among the Nzima and the Ashanti. So the same name with different dialectal variations. So the names are similar, but with different variations across different language groups. So in terms of similarities about African cultures, as far as names of God and divinities are concerned, there are common themes. There is a supreme beings that exist in all traditions. And then major element of nature are also places where you find divinities that are different intermediaries between God and human beings. And those divinities have different roles depending on what you want to ask God. You may refer to the divinity of water, to the divinity of the mountain, the divinity of the forest, and other spirits, ancestral spirit, and other spirits in nature. And many cultures, as I said, recognize ancestral spirit. Actually, it's a central element of the traditional belief. Below God, one of the most constant element of the belief system is the ancestral spirit. The belief is that ancestors, when they are no longer on earth, they're in another world. And from that world, they still see human beings here on earth, and being spirits, they are closer to God. And as such, they can play some good role in terms of making the case for human beings with God. So the shared concept, so divine names always signify wisdom, justice, fertility, creation. And some divinities have similar functions despite different names. Except, for example, you have goddess of fertility in these different languages. It's, in most cases, fertility is associated with femininity. So the divinity of God of fertility is also the divinity of femininity, because creation is more closely associated with women. So in the different terms that you see there are different terms that represent the divinity of fertility and femininity in all languages. I know as a personal experience that among the Baule of the Ivory Coast where I come from, it is so sacred and so powerful that whenever the women have to perform some rituals related to that, men are not supposed to see it, and they are supposed to go and hide in their houses until the women finish the ceremonies. And whenever the traditional nation of the Bauli is under threat from a natural disasters or war or anything, the first element that the first invocation for peace and for protection is done by this divinity of fertility and femininity. There are differences across the different African cultures on this topic. There are variations in the role of the supreme being. They perceive it in slightly different ways. Some of them emphasize intermediary divinities and deities, like among the Yoruba, the Orishas are very important, and others maintain a direct connection with the supreme god. Some will pray directly to the supreme god, like in the case of the Dinka. But in the case of the Yoruba, the intermediaries are more important because they are closer to us. And there are regional influences that you need to take into consideration. As I said, even when everybody believes in the divinity of water, locally, whatever source of water is around is that divinity. So the divinity of water in Yoruba will be sources of water around. And in South Africa or in South Sudan, it will be whatever source of water they have there. Now, there's also influence of Islam and Christianity and the colonial experience on these different traditions. So the interpretation of the different divinities and God in some of the African cultures have been influenced by Islam and Christianity. Now, in modern African, the impact of that in modern African spirituality, what you need to understand is that Africa represents a place of several religious systems. You have the traditional system that survives, and then you have Islam and you have Christianity. And even when Africans become Christians, there's always a kind of survival of the traditional belief system in their Christianity. In the same way, when they become Muslims, there is kind of some form of belief of the traditional system that survive in the interpretation of Islam. So some divine names remain central to modern African spirituality, and many names have been integrated into Christianity and Islam. So there are different forms of syncretism in different parts of Africa, as you see here in the case of the Yoruba traditional belief system has been integrated into some religious form that also integrates Christianity. Like in Brazil, you find belief system like Santeria and Candomblé that includes traditional religious belief. In the same way, among the Maori, among the Shona, identified with the Christian God in some communities. And when you see the translation of the Bible in different African cultures, in many cases, the traditional name for God coincided with the Christian concept of God. And the divinities are where you have the areas of differences. But considering that Christianity also has below God some other form of intermediaries, like Jesus, like Mary, like the saints, in the mind of many African Christians, there is a kind of parallel between Christianity and the traditional African belief. And most African divinities are associated with healing. So healing practices are very closely related with the different divinities. For instance, when somebody is sick, in many systems, the belief is that one of the divinities is the cause of that, or you need to offer some sacrifices to that divinity so that the person can be healed. There's always a spiritual dimension associated with health and being sick. So the key findings: divine names reflect deep linguistics and spiritual meanings. Many African societies share common themes in conceptualizing the divine. Traditional belief systems continue to influence modern spirituality in some cases. The broader implication is that understanding divine names enhance appreciation of African religious diversity, and comparative mythology strengthens cross-cultural dialogue among Africans and between Africans and other people of the world. There are many sources that we use. These are some of the key sources that we use for that, in addition to our own personal experience and interviews and discussion that we have with people that maintain to practice of these different African religions. Thank you.
Marianne, you have a question?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I was wondering if you saw any pattern in which of the names were being syncretistically used and absorbed still.
A lot of African believers associate the saints with ancestral spirits. So the saints in Christianity is seen as the equivalent of the ancestors in the traditional system. And in the different religions of Africa, black people in Brazil, they continue to use Yoruba names for Yoruba divinities and names in the belief system, even when it's actually they are part Christian and part African.
We have a question in the comments from David Wade asking, last semester I had a graduate student teaching assistant from Nigeria whose first name was Divine Gift, all one word. Is this unusual or an unusual name?
It is not unusual because the presenter who presented on Accra and Yoruba, as he said, most of the Yoruba names are phrasal names. So like phrases created by the parents for the children. So typically this name here could have a Christian origin, or it could have a traditional origin. Would have been inspired by the traditional way of naming that is phrasal, or it could have been a devout Christian who want to relate the child to Christianity. But it's not unusual. It's very common among the Yoruba, the Accra, and a lot of African people to have this kind of phrasal names.
The term phrasal names is not one that I had thought of, but it does describe even the names that were listed in the first presentation, how they were more descriptions rather than just a single object or name.
That's why I'm using this term for it. I was reading somebody's dissertation not long ago, and it came along several times, and I told this person, how do you want to call these names and differentiate them from other names? That when we agreed on using that.
Thank you. That helps. Other questions or comments?
Thank you, Dr. Michel. I just want to add something to that question. The name Divine Gift. So the name is this name follows the structure of Yoruba names. As we can see, the combination of divine and gift is the structure how Yoruba structured their indigenous name. So this name is a Christian name, is a Yoruba person that has become a Christian. So if the name followed the structure of the indigenous Yoruba name, that is just it. Thank you.
Thank you.
This name could have existed in Yoruba, but in the Yoruba language would have been a little different. So this appears more like a translation of what they would have done in the Yoruba.
Yes, exactly.
I thought it was interesting, and forgive my ignorance here. I don't know as much about, we learn so much about what they call the 5 major religions of the world that we sometimes forget the traditional religions. So I don't know as much about them, but I thought it was interesting that you mentioned contact with not just Christianity, but Islam as well, and the influence that that has had on the traditional religions in Africa.
Yeah, and influence goes both ways. The African Islam is different from Islam from maybe the Middle East, because you find a lot of Muslims, what I can say for West African countries, that still believe in ancestral spirit, even if they don't worship them the way they would have done, but they still believe in that. And the same way, their interpretation of traditional divinities is now under the influence of the Christian or the Islamic experience. The concept of God in some cultures, like I said, like in the presentation, in some of the cultures, they put more emphasis on the divinities than on God. And in some others, they put more on God than on the divinities. And those who become Christian would probably have that interpretation more on the Christian side. And whatever Christianity is very strong, it certainly have an impact on those even who are not Christian on their concept of God.
And that's related in the nomenclature. There's a couple of questions here in the comments again. Hold on just a second. Star commented, just reiterating how interesting the phrase phrasal name is. So thank you for introducing that to us. And Haruko Momas asked, could you explain more about mountains as divine?
Okay. Key elements of nature are seen as a very strong manifestation of the creator, that is, of God. So the mountain, as powerful, as majestic, as strong as it is seen as a great symbol of the manifestation of God. Just like the vast ocean is, just like rivers are. So the mountain is seen a great manifestation of the creator. Just like if I create a piece of art, whatever is sculpture or whatever, if I'm not around, whoever sees that sees my person through that art. The same way, the mountain is an art of God. So as such, it has a divine essence, just like big trees, big forests, big rivers, everything that is a major element of nature as the divine essence of the artist that created, that is God. As such, we worship them. Just like somebody who admires art and sees a piece of art from Picasso, will see that as a great treasure. And the presence of the art will bring to the mind of that person the creator.
Is it the presence of the creator, or is it just the remembrance of the creator? Do you see what I'm saying?
The creator in the traditional concept is not somewhere, it's within.
Within, okay.
Yeah. So we are in 2 parallel worlds. It's the physical and the divine are in parallel worlds in the same space.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Haruko responded, thank you very much. We have something similar in Japan too.
Yeah, actually, I read a lot of things about the traditional Japanese culture, and it's very close to the Accra culture that I come from. Yeah, the phonetic system is very close to our languages, and the traditional religious system is also very close, coincidentally.
Even the phonetic system.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. I think we will say thank you to all 4 of our groups. All 4 of the papers were very interesting.